Hey YouTube, today we're going to be doing a water pump on the 2009 Lexus RX. First service outside of routine maintenance this car has had in 16 years. Other than tires, brakes, battery, windshield wipers, belts, etc. But the water pump at 100,000 miles is starting to make a little noise, so it's time to change it. I ordered the parts online at Rock Auto. We've got the new water pump here. It's the square cloverleaf style pulley fit-in versus the round one that came stock. They changed these in 2010. I understand this is an upgraded water pump. It's made by ASIN. It's upside down here, but it's ASIN, which is original equipment. Came with the gasket kit, the good metal gasket, the thermostat housing rings. And then, well, I've got it apart. I've got a new thermostat. It came with the housing ring as well. And then two thermostat housing gaskets. And of course the antifreeze. I am not replacing the belt or the idler pulleys because I've already recently have done that job on the car. So let's go ahead and get started. Because of the crazy camera angles on this job, I created an attachment for my laser tripod stand to hold an iPhone, and we'll see how that works. It's adjustable, but the first thing we have to do is pull the wheel off, pull the cover off here, which just pops out, and take these this cover off, which are these push pins here. The factory ones look like this, and you just push them in and then they lift out. This one is not a factory one, it just pulls out. So we'll get this cover off, we'll pull the wheel off, and then we'll jack the car up and put it on a jack stand. Wheel off, engine covers off. Now we have to take this cover off right here, and there's eight of these guys holding this thing on. Take those off. All right, I got the 8 bolts out holding this cover on. It looks like there's 2 push pins on either side that need to come out. Son of a bitch. Pulled the cover off and I found an old screwdriver. That thing's been in there for years. I don't even remember losing it. Anyway, we're on the right side, or this is the driver's side of the car in the front. This is the front bumper, the hood, the radiator, and the drain. Let me flip the phone around. The drain for the radiator is that yellow guy right there. So, where'd it go when I zoomed in? There it is. So we'll twist that off. We'll put a drain pan under here and drain the coolant out of the radiator. All right, while the radiator's draining, this panel on the inner fender well has to come off. 2 bolts with 10mm heads. All right, this upper, what I call the upper motor mount's got to come off. So there's a bolt here with a 14mm head, one here. I know this bracket's eventually going to have to come off, so these 2 with the 10 or 12mm heads, this guy right here with the 12, and this one right here. And while we're in here, this is the bleeder valve, which we'll get to when we fill the system back up with coolant. Oh, and these two here, and this one. All right, a little tip. The only way I could get these 2 bottom bolts was with a 1/4-inch drive with a deep well socket, because there's a lot of shit in the way. and how else are you going to get to them? So I put a little extension on my 1/4-inch drive socket, and I was able to break it loose. Depending on what tools you have, whatever fits in there, go for it. All right, throughout this job, you're going to see me putting the bolts back in the same place I took them out of, especially when it comes to the water pump, because they're all different lengths and sizes, and how else are you going to keep track of all that crap? So that's what I do. All right, before the thermostat housing comes off, it looks like this bracket's got to come off. So 1, 2, 3, one over here, just all the bolts around this piece of bracketry. All right, working on getting this bracket off. So far I got 4 bolts loose. 1, 2, 3, and then this guy down here, which you can't even see the head anymore, 4. And that one, I used this ratchet in box end wrench, which really was a lifesaver. And the rest of them, I used my electric, which is a lifesaver too, but couldn't get it in that bottom one. All right, so now I both think these 2 have got to come off so I can, oh, and of course, that one right there. Okay, I've got this bracket off, and this bracket's got to come off too, which I alluded to earlier. It's this bolt right here. All right, still working on this bracket. There was one bolt way under there that I had to use a 1/4-inch drive ratchet with a long socket to get out. It took me about 10 minutes to get that guy. So anyway, there was more than I thought. There was that one, 2, 3, 4. Down there, there was 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 bolts holding it on down there. And to get this bracket off up here, I'm gonna have to take off this so I can lift this plastic piece up to get that bracket out. Okay, we've got all the bolts out. This bracket's loose. We'll take it out. I'm leaving the bolts in. Some of the bolts you have to leave in because they simply won't, there's not enough clearance to get them out all the way. So I'll go ahead and lift that guy out. Don't want to lose that. Gonna take 2 hands. Okay, I can't get this out, and I know the engine has to be jacked up 3 inches anyway, so we're gonna jack the engine up to this clearance right here, and that's probably the reason why you have to jack the engine up, is to get this guy out. So to do that, get a flashlight. This is the motor mount. I've seen some guys remove this bolt to jack it up, but then it kind of gets stuck. I think I'm going to remove it from the bottom, which is, there's 3 or 4 bolts. You gotta pull these plastic caps off. Looks like this one's already gone. Maybe it's this one over here. This one, and then this bolt here. So those three, if there's any more, I'll let you know. And then when we jack the engine up, it'll separate here. And we may need to take this one out too. I'll let you know on that. Okay, I removed the pan under the engine, and yes, there are three bolts holding this. This guy, the one under this plug, and the one under this plug. The pan only had a couple of 10mm heads, and the rest were all push plugs. They came out very easily. And then I noticed while I'm under here, fragments of the belt are in here. So my guess is the pulley on the water pump is loose, and the belt started rubbing somewhere. So I will have to get a new belt. Actually, a quarter of the belt is missing at this point. All right, now that I'm under the car looking at this motor mount, I pulled these two plugs. So there is 1, 2, 3 bolts holding this motor mount. But then earlier I was talking about taking this bolt loose. But I think what I'm going to do is pull these two plugs and do the same thing, loosen it from the bottom. So we're going to be loosening 5 bolts from the bottom under the 5 plugs. All right, these three were 17 mils holding this guy up. And the two in the back were 14, and you need deep well sockets for both of them. Now we'll slip the jack with a board in between the jack and the oil pan and see if we can jack this engine up 3 inches. All right, as you can see, I jacked it up about 1 inch. And back in there, you can see it too. It's jacked up, a little dark, but you can see it. So I'm gonna see if that's enough. If not, I'll jack it up a little more. All right, I finally got this bracket out. It took a little bit of finagling to get it out. And you'll see on these bolts, they have signs of silicon on them. At least those two on the bottom left and these two on the top right. This little one doesn't. So I'm going to clean those bolts up before I install them and put on Permatex number 2. Some people use Teflon tape. Some people say the Teflon tape doesn't hold up to the heat. Some people use silicone. Some people say it's not good. This looks like silicone, but you know, it's from the factory. I'm using Permatex number 2. I've had good luck with that in the past. All right, this is the thermostat housing. We got a hose clamp here and a hose clamp here and 3 bolts. One here, one underneath here, and then a stud and a nut. Usually the whole stud comes out right here. So we'll go ahead and take that off. So we'll loosen these clamps. We'll get a pick and loosen the hose from the housing on both sides. Undo the 3 bolts and get that thermostat assembly out of there. Okay, it looks like that hose attached to the thermostat housing right there. I was able to get the clamp off. But the hose, I mean, if I worked on it for about 15 or 20 minutes, I could get this hose off. But I've seen a lot of the other guys and gals, whoever, just put this up out of the way. So that's what I'm going to do. So next thing to do is get this belt off. And this is the tensioner right here. You put a 14mm on it. You turn it clockwise, counterclockwise, which is actually tightening on for the bolt because it's a left-handed thread, and it loosens this pulley, and then you can slip the belt off. And before I take the belt off, I'm going to break these bolts loose on the pulley. Having the belt on that will probably help, and then I'll stick a big screwdriver in between two of the bolts to hold the pulley from turning while I'm breaking the other bolts loose. All right, I was able to break the bolts loose with just the belt tension, and there's no way this pulley's coming out, which is okay. I can still move it around and get to all the bolts on the water pump. I just have to remember to put the pulley on before I put the pump in place. So next step is to break all the bolts loose on the water pump. And I'll use the new one as a template where all the bolts are. And as a matter of fact, as I take a bolt out of the old one, I'm going to put it in the new one up on top of the engine, just so I have all the bolts in the right place. I was having a hard time getting to some of those water pump bolts, so I jacked the engine up just a little bit more, and I was able to slide this guy out. Big help. Okay, some of the bolts are behind these pulleys, so I'm going to take off the idler pulley and the tensioner pulley. And remember, this is a left-handed thread, so clockwise loosens it. Counterclockwise loosens this. Okay, very important on this upper idler pulley, there's a washer on the inside. You have to make sure you put that washer back. A washer on the inside and a washer on the outside. All right, the idler pulley in between the crankshaft and the power steering pump. That guy right there needs to come off too. It's a 14mm bolt. There's covering up some of the water pump bolts. Okay, I got the water pump out. I got all the bolts transferred to the new pump. I'll put the old pump here, transfer the bolts to the old pump when I put the new pump in. Here's the old pump. And yeah, there were signs of antifreeze leaking. And let's see if I can show you. It's hard to see, but it's definitely wobbling back and forth. There it is. So this pump would not have gone another 50 miles. No way. Especially with the belt shredding. The belt started shredding. It's a brand new belt too. I have to go out and get a belt because I didn't get that. And I think while I'm at it, I'll get the 3 idler pulleys. All right, 4 hours into the job, we got the water pump off. I'm going to go ahead and take these 2 bolts off, replace the thermostat. Got the case off. I'll remove the thermostat. This little pin here, I'll put the new pin from the new thermostat in the same position. And put the new gasket in and put that back together. All right, now I'll remove the gasket, clean up the gasket surface, put the new gasket and water pump on. The bolts with the 10mm heads get torqued up to 9 inch-pounds. The ones with the 12s, 15 foot-pounds torque. It's probably going to take a while. Those bolts are, some of them, hard to get to. All right, I cleaned the gasket area really well. I used a razor blade and I scraped the surface of the gasket this way. And then I checked it with my finger to make sure it was clean and smooth. So I am ready to put that pump back in. For all the bolts that had silicone on them, I am using this Permatex number 2. And I'm just going to put a little bit on the threads and wipe it around a little bit with a rag, and this will seal it. This is what I always use, and it should do the trick. Got the pulley back on. I used a screwdriver. I wedged it between one of the bolts and that center hub. I was able to tighten 2, then I rotated 180 degrees and got the other 2. Now I'll put the thermostat housing back on. I put a new O-ring on that pipe and on the water pump housing. Now I'll put the thermostat housing back in. I went to Napa to buy the belt, and I got new idler pulleys. They're made by Gates, which is a good brand name. So I'll put 2 new idler pulleys on. All right, I got the tensioner on, and I turned this nut counterclockwise, and this whole assembly rotates. And then I put this Allen wrench in through this hole. And looks like maybe it's a 5mm. And that keeps the tensioner loose. And then I'll put the belt on, and then I'll rotate this a little bit counterclockwise just to get the Allen wrench back out again. All right, next up, this bracket got to go back on. And 1, 2, 3, 4 are going to get Permatex number 2. Take this off the end of the bolt so the bolt bottoms out. So Permatex 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I've got the upper motor mount in. These 2 brackets, a little bolt right there that holds this wire and harness in. Oh, I got to tighten this wire and harness bolt here. Ooh, glad I'm filming this. And now I'll do the lower motor mounts, those 5 nuts I took off. I'm going to fill up the radiator. This car has 2 bleeder valves, one here at the top of the radiator and one here on the top of the engine. So I'm going to break this loose, and I'm going to stick a hose on it. And I'm actually going to run the car a while with this one open till all the air pockets come out. So I started the car, and I'm adding the antifreeze here. And I'm going to add it till it comes up to here and no more air bubbles come out. Then I'll close the bleeder valve. A few minutes. Still getting air bubbles out. It's starting to get warm. Temperature gauge is still on cold now. Means the thermostat probably hasn't opened. Air bubbles are coming up. I'm going to let it run. In a few more minutes, we're getting air. I did turn the heater on in the car, and the temperature gauge is about halfway up. We still have fluid in the funnel. I'm going to keep going as long as air keeps coming out. I'm going to keep going. In about 20 minutes. And it's been a couple minutes since any air bubbles came out. So I think I've got it. And close this bleeder valve. There's still a little juice in the funnel, so the juice is right up to the top. Turn the hose off. Close this bleeder valve. Put the radiator cap on. Fill the overflow. put the panels all back on underneath. Put the wheel on, take it for a test drive. Well, hope this helped. Thanks for watching.